Hello everybody, I hope that all of you are doing super well, and we got insane news and discussions to talk about around Marvel Tōkon Fighting Souls because ArcSys developers were present in the last state of play for Japanese video games. And well, we got a trailer for a new closed beta, which is amazing. People are going to be able to play the game again, and with actually adding Ghost Rider and Spider-Man into it, so a bigger roster and characters to try out, and also new stages. But the real big discussion is that they just premiere or show a new stage, which is X Mansion. As we all know, one of the most iconic, X-Men locations in Marvel Comics ever. And there is a lot of very famous characters in the background and characters that a lot of people want to see as playable in the game. But a lot of the times with fighting games and other genres, like for example platform fighters like Smash Brothers, when you see a character in the background, it is generally kind of like a bad sign for the possibility of that character actually making it as a playable one into the roster of the game. So we're going to be discussing that in this video in more detail, and what exactly could this mean for the future of this game and its roster, taking into account that it's supposed to come out next year. And well, just to make a summary of all the X-Men that appear in the X Mansion stage in the trailer, there's actually a lot of characters. We see Professor X, Beast, Angel, also a Colossus, we also see Gambit, Iceman, and even a Sentinel or a couple of Sentinels in one of the shots. And then at the start also in the initial shot, and I haven't seen anyone talk about this, maybe some people have talked about it on Twitter, but I don't have Twitter so I haven't seen it, but I do see Rogue like on this seat with Gambit, because you see a girl with like white hair at the top sitting next to Gambit in the first shot of the X Mansion like a space in the trailer. So like Rogue is also on this character list as a background character. I just haven't seen anyone talking about it. But yeah, it's a pretty long list. And then later we also see Nightcrawler and Psylocke. So a really long list of X-Men characters that a lot of people want to see as playable are present as background characters in this X Mansion stage. Now there are examples historically of fighting game characters that have been on the background of a stage and they're still playable. Like, it's not something impossible, but it's also not necessarily common. Like the most new example that I can think about is Guile on Street Fighter 6, because on Guile's stage he's actually on the background and you can play as Guile of course on SF6. So it is possible, but it's not necessarily something that happens all the time. It generally goes the other way. Like if a background character is there, they are generally not playable. Now, with all of this information in mind, which is like the key things that we have to understand to have a good discussion about this, the problem that I have with all of this is that the developers have said openly in the past that they want to use characters that are uncommon or new or that have not been present on games like Marvel vs. Capcom, to not just imitate, the spirit of that other Marvel fighting game. So if we take that idea and we also mix it with the possibility of all these background characters not being playable, then that means that the most famous X-Men that are not in the background, at least in the trailer, are Wolverine, Cyclops, and Magneto. And those are very, like NPC characters, maybe Cyclops less than Wolverine and Magneto, but those are kind of like the most famous classic X-Men that are not as background characters, in the trailer. And then you could also add other ones that have not been playable on a Marvel fighting game that could be added into Tokon, like Emma Frost, for example, is not on the background. Magic is also not on the background, and there are more options, right? Not only those, but those are the big names that come to my mind if we follow this idea that background characters are not playable and characters that are not on the background will be playable. So maybe those 5 X-Men, that I just said as an example, Wolverine, Cyclops, Magneto, Magic, and Emma Frost, might be playable in Tokon. But even if we take that idea, into our minds, the other problem that I have with all of this is that all the background characters in the X Mansion stage look very detailed. Like the character models of the background characters look suspiciously detailed. So I would maybe take a more cautious approach into this and say that some of these background characters will actually be playable, because it actually looks, in my opinion, as the models that you could use for playable characters on a different visual scale put into the background. Like, they do not look like your typical background characters. Like Gambit, Nightcrawler, and Colossus specifically, to me, look stunning. Like, they look really good visually for just being a couple of guys in the background of the stage. So unless this game is gonna make extra, you know, like effort when it comes to the visual fidelity that background is supposed to have and showing characters and whatever, maybe those are the actual models of characters that we are gonna be able to play. I'm not saying necessarily on release though, like maybe we're gonna play those characters as DLC, but the models are there. So maybe those models were created thinking about making those characters playable and not only as background, taking into account this, you know, graphical quality that they have. Is just something that I've been thinking about since I saw the trailer, because to me they just look suspiciously good for just being background characters. And I personally compared it with other games like Street Fighter 6, for example. When Terry got his gameplay trailer for that game and he came out, there is actual, you know, Fatal Fury characters in the Pow Pow Cafe stage, and we can see like Blue Mary and Joe, and they don't look bad, but they also do not look as good as an actual playable Street Fighter character. And I think that the work that ArcSys did, for example, with, again, Gambit, Nightcrawler, Colossus, and other of those background characters that we see in the X Mansion is miles better than, for example, what Capcom did with Blue Mary or Joe. So I'm not saying, you know, I'm not trying to confirm something that I don't have the information for. I'm not gonna say that they will only be background characters or that all of them will be playable, but I will not just go ahead and take out crazy conclusions that all of these characters that we have in the background of the expansion stage are out. I think that some of them might be playable in the future. Also because, guys, let's not forget, if we follow this idea, you know, that background characters are not playable, Daredevil or Matt Murdock was in the New York stage as a background character in the first ever trailer for this game. So not having Daredevil and Tokon to me would be a sin. Like, it's a character that has never been on a Marvel fighting game, and it makes so much sense for a fighting game. ArcSys said openly again that they want different characters and not repeat the NBC formula, so Daredevil is kind of like a must in my opinion. And if we see Matt Murdock, you know, in the background of that New York stage, then are we not gonna play as Daredevil? So yeah, it's a big point of discussion. Just don't jump into conclusions, you know, like we gotta keep waiting. And then the last thing that I want to say is that with all of this, you know, that they showed in this state of play, which is actually very little in my opinion, like it's just a stage basically, and getting to play a couple of characters that we have seen for months, like the devs need to show a big trailer in the Game Awards. Like if we don't see a big character reveal with like 2 full teams, you know, 8 characters like in the first one at the Game Awards in December, it will be a big disappointment, because either the game is going to launch with like less than 20 characters, or maybe even we live in a world in which the 2026 release is really just like December and it's really 2027 in a practical sense. So yeah, that was the video, guys. Let me know in the comments what you think about all of this situation. It's pretty weird and kind of controversial in some way to see all of those X-Men in the background and put people on a tense situation, you know, about their favorite characters before they even make a big, you know, new character reveal, hopefully at the Game Awards, because we really do need it. And thank you for watching. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. See you on the next one.